Resident Evil served as the popularizer of the survival horror genre, not the first game in the genre, with other games such as Alone in the Dark having gotten there first, but was the one that made it into a mainstream commercial gaming genre, much like Halloween did as a kicking off point for the slasher film cycle. Years after the games had become massive hits, a film adaptation helmed by polarizing film director Paul W.S. Anderson would be released. You can hear my thoughts on that film and my thoughts on Paul W.S. Anderson's entire career in my series of retrospective video essays I did on him in a playlist I will link in the description. The success of Resident Evil allowed for other survival horror game series to be born, including another long-running Japanese survival horror game franchise, Silent Hill. Silent Hill focuses more on psychological horror while mirroring Resident Evil's obsessions with emulating horror films with a cinematic style and numerous intertextual references. The fixed camera angles, beautifully disturbing monster design, deep story and lore, and haunting score helped to establish a unique identity for the series rather than simply being seen as a Resident Evil clone. This unique identity entranced French film director Christophe Gans, who, while working on his breakthrough hit, The Brotherhood of the Wolf, became obsessed with the idea of adapting the game. He was a true fan like Paul Anderson, which would help him to have a strong vision for an adaptation. He was able to secure the rights from Konami due to his passionate vision for the project and his true love for the series. He wanted to adapt the game's unique fixed camera angles, creature design, music, and world authentically. He knew he would shift elements of the story to better fit within a larger, coherent cinematic story, but along with screenwriter Roger Avary, he strongly believed he would be retaining the spirit of the original games. This was viewed as essential to making a successful adaptation.
Whenever I approach anything to adapt, you have to be willing to completely disassemble it and to create something new. The one element that you must remain true to is the spirit of the material. If you're not true to the spirit of the material, then you've completely lost.
The film's plot would serve as an adaptation of the first game's plotline, with elements from the other games thrown in. One of the major changes that would be made would be to the protagonist. The original game's protagonist, Harry Mason, would be replaced, with Gans stating that the more he dug into the material, the more he felt that to be true to the spirit of the game would be to make him a woman.
He's a man named Harry Mason, and he worked very well in the game, but when we start to write him, respecting his personality, we found that it's a woman. I don't think that it's important if the main character is wearing a dress or a pants. What is important is that we'll preserve the atmosphere of the game, which is the most important thing.
This idea is one that I find a bit stupid. It is based on biases surrounding gender that are seriously reductive and limit the potential for the types of stories we can see. It reminds me of a similar decision made with Hideo Nakata's adaptation of Koji Suzuki's Ring, where the main protagonist was gender swapped for the film, with the same reason given, essentially boiling down to mothers supposedly being the only parents audiences will buy as caring about their children on a deep emotional level. I find this annoying as the rationale for the decision, though it does set up the film to feature several female leads, which makes it stand out in the horror film landscape. Watching the behind-the-scenes documentary that is included on the Silent Hill DVD is very interesting. We get a lot of awesome behind-the-scenes footage looking at the effects, which is enlightening, but we also get to hear from some really interesting creative people on their perspective on the project. While some of the interviews can have some bizarre and unintentionally hilarious moments in them, such as multiple actresses claiming Silent Hill is science fiction,
about seeing sci-fi or this sci-fi genre with just females leading the story in a way.
But overall, they are very fun to listen to. We get to hear from Carol Spear about her work as production designer on the film and how she approached creating the complex multi-world design of the film. I've always admired Spear's work on Cronenberg's projects, and her appearance in this documentary was a treat. We get to hear a lot from Gans and Roger Avary, the producers Samuel Hadida and Don Carmody, the stars Radha Mitchell, Sean Bean, Laurie Holden, Deborah Kara Unger, and the adorable Jodelle Ferland, and others, as well as Roberto Campanella, who served as movement coordinator as well as portraying Pyramid Head and the janitor in the film, with an interesting exploration of how the team approached the monsters on both a design level with Patrick Tatopoulos' disturbing creature designs, as well as the bizarre and twisted movement that Campanella infused them with. The film would take advantage of having such an awesome team of professional creatives to craft the film practically, but also used extensive CGI to add even more to the film. This would be used to fully realize Gan's vision for the authentic adaptation of the games. It would be risky as well, especially for a film of this era, as films that over-relied on CGI have not always aged well. This would serve as Christophe Gan's major Hollywood break and would be his final film within that system for a long while. Despite the film's modest success at the box office, the film was released on April 21st, 2006 and grossed over $100 million worldwide on a $50 million budget, with an additional $23 million generated from DVD sales. He would not become a major Hollywood filmmaker. He opted against directing the sequel Silent Hill Revelation and has only directed an adaptation of Beauty and the Beast in his native France since. He is directing the upcoming Return to Silent Hill film, which will be an adaptation of Silent Hill 2, which he has described as more of a psychological horror film than his previous Silent Hill film, which I can't wait to see in theaters. With that context being laid out, what do I think of the film? Well, let's explore Silent Hill. You can clearly see Gan's fandom throughout the film. He so obviously loves the source material, which provides a huge benefit to the film. He tries to adapt it faithfully in a lot of ways, probably does the most accurate adaptation of a PS1 or PS2 style horror game that I've ever seen. The film has fixed camera angles, the music of the games, the weird narrative structure, the cutscene-esque exposition dumps, and the constant sense of running through the humanless streets that make up so much of your time playing those games. This helps to give the film a strong sense of style and texture, but also hampers the storytelling in some ways as well. The story of the film is its weakest point. I think the core narrative thread of a mother doing everything possible to find her daughter and then coming against this hellish underworld inhabited by strange monsters and hellish Puritans is fascinating. However, the execution of the narrative gets bogged down by attempts to over-explain everything. This is the type of film, like a Dario Argento film, that works best as a series of stunning visuals and dynamic music matched together in ways that can manifest transcendent emotional experiences. Unlike Argento films, however, Gan and Avery spend way too much time trying to rationalize everything that happens and explains the film's vaguely interesting backstory to you. The film would be better if it leaned into a more incoherent story structure and spent more time crafting beautiful set pieces. The film has a magical quality to it, crafted in large part from the beautiful production design by Carol Spear, the disturbing creature makeup, design and movement, and the score which masterfully reuses music from the games. This quality almost feels in line with a Guillermo del Toro film at times, though never matches his peaks. The acting in the film is pretty good across the board. The team purposely chose actors more known for independent films than mainstream ones. Outside of Sean Bean, this gave the cast a strong collection of talent without burdening it with the negative effect of overfamiliarity. I believe this is a good approach for horror films in general. The more familiar we are with the actor, the harder it is to see them as someone truly vulnerable, as a unique human being. In horror, good actors who are lesser known or have less exposure to a mass audience are the sweet spot. This film does a good job with this. Radha Mitchell does a good job, as does Laurie Holden. I also believe that Jodelle Ferland does a good job in her multiple character role as well. Sean Bean is an interesting case, his character being invented due to a demand from the studio, which I am ultimately torn about. On the one hand, I think the film could be stronger if it hyper-focused on Rose's journey into hell to get her daughter, but at the same time, this letterboxed review from Ivy Nelson puts it into a different context that I like as well. Quote, "Okay, hear me out. The Sean Bean plotline is good because it's about a man trying to access the universe of total horror that the women in his life are trapped in and failing." End quote. I also love how these two narratives tie in at the end, with the finale being a truly haunting send-off for the film. As a fan of Silent Hill myself, I love to see the creatures depicted on screen in such a cool way. I love this film's visual design so much. The soundtrack is to die for. That being said, the film has serious narrative problems. With that being said, however, I am someone who can't overlook narrative problems in a film when I love the visual storytelling and the soundtrack so much. This film in particular has continued to grow on me over the years. Not only do I think it's a really good adaptation, but I think it's a good film in general. It's a film that I put on many nights as I'm going to sleep in hopes that it will infuse my dreams, or rather nightmares, with its darkly surreal imagery. It has slowly imprinted itself on me in a way that I could have never expected. The sequel is awful, but this film holds up well, even with some occasionally subpar CGI. I keep getting drawn back into that town. I keep coming back to Silent Hill.
Fuck you, you stupid